Almost every NBA team has a superstar player, and it seems almost every other week an all-time NBA record is being set or broken by an up-and-coming player. So much so that I was able to find at least one all-time record set by one member of almost every NBA team. The only rule we're going to use for today's video, though, is that it has to be an all-time record and not just a franchise team record. And one of the most impressive records that I found owned by Kevin Durant is the fact that he's Team USA's all-time Olympic scorer, which is impressive considering Team USA is where all the greatest NBA players of all time have played, at least American ones. And his longevity and greatness from a young age have helped him out, because he's played in 3 Olympics, while greats like Michael Jordan have only played in 2, but even then, LeBron also played in 3, but KD has scored almost twice as much as LeBron. And even more impressive, Olympic Melo has played in 4, but still has 100 points scored less than Durant. It makes sense though, I'm sure other teams in the Olympics have seen and played against a few guys with a similar size to Carmelo Anthony. They may have had a slight idea of how to guard him, but it's clear no one in the world on any other team has any clue how to guard Kevin Durant. His fellow Olympian and Nets teammate James Harden doesn't hold such a great NBA record, because he holds the all-time spot for most turnovers in a single season, but he also holds the number 3 and the number 5 spots. But hey, on the bright side, James is also the all-time leading left-handed scorer in the NBA. Jaylen Brown set a scoring record of his own back in January of this year, when he came out on fire and torched the Cavs, scoring 33 points. But the impressive part is he did it in 19 minutes, setting an NBA record for most points ever scored in under 20 minutes, fighting 13 of his 21 shots and 3 out of 4 from 3. You know you have to be on some sort of hot streak to shoot more than 1 shot every minute you're in the game. If you're gonna put up Kobe Bryant like shot attempts, you gotta at least back it up. And on that night, the young Jaylen Brown did. But speaking of Kobe Bryant stat lines, Jordan Clarkson had the perfect one, with 40 points, 0 assists, going 16 of 33 from the field and 5 of 16 from 3, becoming the first ever player with 40 plus points, 0 assists, and at least 15 attempts from 3. But that kind of stat's a little too specific. What really makes this the perfect Kobe Bryant night was that in the 4th quarter, he put up 24 points with 8 field goals made. Speaking of young NBA players setting records, along with Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett shattered the previous NBA record for most rookie jersey sales when he came into the league. Of course, Zion had more than RJ, but Zion was a phenomenon. He was all over SportsCenter and ESPN every second of every day before he had ever played an NBA game and went first overall. I think it makes it all that more impressive for RJ, being that he was the 3rd overall pick, not as hyped up, and still sold twice as many jerseys as the previous record holder, Lonzo Ball, whose younger brother LaMelo became the youngest player to ever record a triple-double in his rookie season at 19 years and 140 days old, when he put up 22 points, 12 rebounds, and 11 assists, topping the previous record holder Markelle Fultz, Luka Doncic, and his own brother Lonzo. Another set of brothers in the NBA inside the Antetokounmpo family have already made NBA history of their own. When Giannis led the Bucks to the NBA championship, himself, Thanasis, and Kostas became the first ever sibling trio to become NBA champions. It's an impressive feat, but their family's coming up on maybe an even more impressive all-time record, with their 4th brother Alex just signing with the Raptors G League team. And as a 6'8" forward, it seems like in no time, they're going to be the first set of 4 brothers to have ever played in the NBA together. On another night, Zach LaVine and Kobe White were playing like they were twin brothers, because they were the first ever teammates to both make 8 threes in a single game back in February. Clearly, it's a record that would have never been anywhere near touched until these past couple of years, and I'm sure we'll see it happen again one day given the current state of the game. But 8 threes each is a lot of threes. That's 48 points just off of 2 players hitting 3-pointers. Zach finished that game with 48 points of his own, and Kobe had 30. These aren't the 2 players you would have necessarily expected to put up this type of record, but it just goes to show any player in the NBA can get hot on any given night. And that's what happened to Damian Lillard when he hit an NBA record 12 3-pointers in this last year's playoff against the Denver Nuggets, in what Terry Stotts said was the greatest playoff performance he had ever seen. And he may not be wrong. Dame scored 55 points and was the answer for everything the Nuggets threw at him that night. He looked superhuman going against 6'8" Aaron Gordon and 6'10" Michael Porter Jr. all night, with neither of them being able to stop him. And the playoff record's great, but it still resulted in a loss, and it may have broken Klay Thompson's record 11 threes in a playoff game, but Lillard put up 12 in a 52-minute double overtime game, while Klay had his night in only 40 minutes. And while we're here, we may as well get into some of Klay Thompson's records, who holds about as many 3-point records as possible, so it was tough to just pick one for him. He scored a record 37 points in a single quarter, made the most consecutive threes to start a game, the most 3.5, the most 3.25, and the most 3.25 without a miss. And for the first time in 2 years, pretty soon we're about to finally see this man back on an NBA floor. A man who almost never touched an NBA floor was Fred VanVleet, after going undrafted in 2016. But he persevered, never gave up, and eventually proved that he belonged in the league after everyone in all 30 teams told him that he didn't. In 2018, he broke out. In 2019, he helped the Raptors win their championship. So in 2020, he signed a 4-year, $85 million deal with them, the largest contract ever signed by an undrafted player in the NBA, finally proving that he belonged and deserved a full-time contract. Not all records are good records though. The Philadelphia 76ers bring us two of the worst in the NBA. Andre Drummond's the record holder for most free throws missed in a game with 23, which was from back when he was on the Pistons as their up-and-coming player, but was on pace to be a worse free throw shooter than Shaq, making an embarrassing 35% of them. In his record-setting game, he was hacked the entire time, at one point getting fouled 5 times in 9 seconds, and his 23 misses beat out a 50-year record previously held by Wilt Chamberlain. While at the same time, the 76ers also have Ben Simmons, technically, who holds the record for worst free throw percentage in playoff history at 34.2%. So to have them both on the same team, pretty scary stuff. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, it was hard to come up with an all-time record for them considering their roster, but at least I didn't come up with a negative one. There was a lot of franchise records to go source through, but we're not here for those. The one I did find though, the all-time record, was the fact that D'Angelo Russell was the youngest player to ever record 200 3-pointers and 500 assists in a single season. Kind of odd, I know, but it's fine because speaking of 3-pointers, that leads us to a few others. Maybe surprising, but Duncan Robinson is the fastest NBA player by far to reach 400 career 3-pointers. He did so in 125 games, beating out the previous record holder Trae Young, who it took 159 games to do so. While over on the Kings, Buddy Hield is currently the fastest NBA player to have ever scored 1,000 3-pointers. He did so in 350 games to slightly beat out Steph Curry, but he better soak it up while he can because it's not going to be a record that he holds for too much longer. Because on the pace he's currently at, Duncan is on pace to hit his 1,000th 3-pointer in his 312th game, which would be sometime next season. And speaking of 3-pointers, we have Trae Young, who last year set an insane playoff record to become the first ever player to record 45 points and 10 assists in a playoff game. And what makes it even more impressive, he did it against the future NBA champion Milwaukee Bucks in a win. That's hard to top, and this next record definitely doesn't, but it comes from TJ McConnell, who may be the last player you think of when you think of all-time NBA records. But TJ actually somehow holds 2 insane ones. He was the first bench player to record multiple 15-point, 15-assist games, and the only player in NBA history to record 9 steals in one half, while the all-time record for a single game was 11, which he somehow didn't break. He finished that game with only 10, but it's okay because his stat line included a triple-double with 100% shooting on the night. We all remember Way Off P's infamous collapse in the 2020 postseason, where he fell off worse than we've ever seen someone do. Well, within that time, he made history, becoming the first player to shoot under 25% in 3 straight playoff games since Bob Cousy in 1960. It makes sense, a star hasn't played that bad very often, and if it was a bench player that did so, they'd probably get benched after the second game. While on the subject of 2020, that couldn't have been a weirder year for Bradley Beal and the Wizards, who set 2 records for completely opposite reasons. Personally, he did great, scoring 25 plus points in the first 17 straight games of the NBA season, the most to start a year since Michael Jordan. But in that very same year, the Wizards went on a streak of losing 10 straight games whenever Bradley scored at least 40 points. So whenever he was more involved and his teammates weren't, the team did bad. Another bad team is the Orlando Magic, which I didn't find any all-time records owned by them. It makes sense though given the young age of the roster. The only all-time record I did find was that Mo Bamba has the longest wingspan of any player to have ever attended the NBA Combine at 7 foot 10 inches. So just for reference, the average man has a wingspan of about 2 inches more than their height. Well, Mo Bamba is 7 foot even, so yeah. Another young and upcoming player, Ludwig Dort, has really started to improve himself recently, and one of the first times he really ever bursted on the scene was when he set his own all-time record, becoming the youngest player to ever score 30 points in a Game 7, when he did it against the Houston Rockets at under 21 years old. Zion Williamson's another player who has a historic record before his 21st birthday. It was the fact that he was the only player to have ever averaged 25 points per game for their career before they turned 21. The second closest was LeBron James, who averaged 24.99 points. Nikola Jokic has defied all odds in his NBA career after falling asleep during the NBA draft and then being taken late in the second round. Well, he's really turned things around since then, as we know, becoming the first ever player taken in the second round to be named NBA MVP. Now back in 2016, Kevin Love also had an MVP performance of his own, even though it only lasted 1 game. Well, actually 1 quarter, when he scored 34 points in the first quarter of the Cavs game against the Portland Trailblazers, finishing at 3 points off of Klay Thompson's all-time record. And considering Kevin started this game out like that, if he continued the rest of the night on that same pace, he was set to score 136 points, but instead he finished with 40. As a matter of fact, during that year's All-Star game, Anthony Davis set an all-time record when he scored 52 points in it and took a lob from almost everyone on the team, shattering the previous record of 42 points set by Wilt Chamberlain way back in the day. Players don't typically score too many points in the All-Star game, so that's a record that's gonna last. And so will JaVale McGee's record. He actually doesn't hold an all-time record, but a world record for most basketballs dunked in in one jump. He dunked 2 balls during the dunk contest, the same night he attempted to set the world record for dunking 3 balls in a single jump. Coming from the Detroit Pistons, first overall pick Cade Cunningham is really having an up and down rookie year so far, after he was off to a historically bad start, shooting 17% through his first 3 games. Something we've never seen from an NBA player ever taken at any position before. But speaking of debuts, in Luka Doncic's debut to the NBA playoffs, he had 42 points, beating out John Williamson, George Mikan, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Julius Erving, and Derrick Rose, who were all previously in the top 5 before Luka. Ja Morant got extremely close to beating Luka for that record, scoring 47 points in his second ever playoff game. It's okay though because it's still an all-time record, giving him the most points scored by a player under 21, a record that used to be owned by LeBron James, who had 45. Then for the Spurs and Rockets, they had no current players with records. I could have been cheap and tried to be fair to them and found maybe a cool franchise record that one of their players have set, but we're not giving out any handouts to a team for not being good enough. If you enjoyed, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'm out.